Inga says, yes, please. Right on. Okay, and I am going to turn on my camera as well. Hello. So good to see you. Now, I've got 3 different devices going for this. So if I look away from the camera, I'm not being rude. I'm just trying to keep track of Facebook, Instagram, and the webinar. It's so good to have you with me today. Thank you so much for being here. Very excited to meet you. Some of Inga, I think you're new to me. And Fumi, I haven't seen you in a long time. Welcome back. So good to see you. Today, we are going to talk about the changes we see in irides and why we see those changes. I would love to have a conversation with you, and I would love it if you would drop comments. If you've got questions, please post them. If they're appropriate to what we're talking about, I will certainly address them. If they are not appropriate, I will defer you, and we will kind of work that way just because we do have some time constraints, right? So again, my name is Judith Cobb. We're going to have some fun today talking about the way irides change. And just as we're getting ready to do that, again, just make sure you're comfy. Small group interaction, lots of back and forth. We've got people joining us on Instagram. Thank you for being there. And we've got people with us on the Facebook group and people with us in on the webinar live. So good to have you with me. We always have to do this little reminder that the information I'm sharing with you is for your education only. It is not meant to diagnose or prescribe. You are responsible for any results, good or bad, you get from using this information. We good with that? All right, so for those of you who are with me on Instagram, I'm going to bring my camera closer to the screen so you have a better view of what's going on. All right, so I'm showing you this set of pictures first. This is a client who's been with me for many years. I'm going to show you these pictures, then I'm going to show you more recent photos of his eyes. I want you to burn these images into your mind for what you're seeing here. These were taken in 2015 with the camera I had back then, which was an 8 megapixel camera that was set up specifically to do iridology. Okay, you've got that burned in your mind. You know what you're looking at there? All righty. These pictures were taken 18 months later. Now, I want to know from you, what changes do you see? I'm going to put some up side by side. There we go. There we have the older image on the left and the newer image on the right. What changes do you see in these images? These photos were taken 18 months apart. So he had done a lot of work with herbs and supplements and diet. What changes do you see? I really want some comments here. I really don't like just talking nonstop and kind of running at the mouth. What changes do you see? Do you see any change in color? Color, Inga, yeah, it looks like there's a color change. Absolutely, absolutely, it sure does. Anything else? If we come in really, really close for those of you who are on Instagram, do you see anything else there? It does look like the color has changed, and visibly the colors are different. I'm going to ask you to also then compare the skin tones. See the skin tone on the image on the left, the skin tone on the image on the right. Do you see how different they are? Do you see how different the sclera color is? So what I'm going to tell you here is the only thing that has truly changed is the technology. The image on the left was taken with an 8 megapixel digital camera that has an incandescent ring flash. The incandescent ring flash changes the color of things Even the camera itself, depending on how the white balance is set up, will change how things appear. The image on the right, taken 18 months later, was taken with a 24 megapixel digital camera that has an LED flash. So the incandescent flash is a slightly yellow light. The LED flash is a slightly bluish light. That alone will account for the color variation. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, I'd like to see a makes sense in the comments box. Yes, thank you, Inga. Thank you for that. I appreciate you saying yes. Now, the reason I lead out with that is because I am really concerned about the way so many people on Facebook talk about how their eyes have changed, how they've gotten lighter and things like that, when they have clearly been taken, the images, the before and after images were clearly taken with different cameras in different lighting settings. What it means is if the images were not taken under controlled conditions using the same camera, the camera on the same settings, and with the same lighting conditions, the before and after pictures are invalid. Now, for some of you who may have studied Jensenian iridology the way I did originally 40 years ago, I knew nothing about photography. And when I first learned that technology plays a huge role in how the images appear, it was a real kick in the gut. I didn't want to believe it. And yet I knew from my camera that was even before this one, which was an Olympus professional body camera, and it was a print camera, like we shot film in it. I knew that I could take that roll of film to the developer, to the lab, to the photo lab. Do they even have photo labs anymore? Maybe a few. And they would print them up for me. But if I didn't give them a color swatch as the first shot, I was never sure what I was going to get back, right? Because they could change the settings that they used to develop those photos. And so I learned very quickly that the first image on every roll had to be a color, a shot of the Kodak film box. I also learned that Fujifilm shoots green, shoots more to a green hue. Different brands of film would shoot to a different hue. And so there was so much tech that had to be controlled for in order to make the photos be accurate, in order for us to do a before and after with any accuracy. So if you're still with me, I obviously haven't offended you too badly if you believe that eyes change easily and rapidly and that you can do a cleanse and change your eyes from one color to another. Obviously, I haven't offended you too seriously, and that's good. That's good. We're going to dive more into this in just a moment because eyes do change. We're going to talk about what changes we see, what causes those changes. And it's nothing like what I was taught originally. You know, in my early training, and I'm not going to mention a name, there was a woman who published a book about iridology. And in that book, she had before and after photos. After the book had been in print for a few years, she admitted to using color filters to produce the after photos. And when asked why did she do that, she said, well, I knew the eyes would change and we had a print deadline and I needed to get this done. So I just doctored the photos with color filters. And that really made me wonder about the integrity of before and after photos, right? So such an important question that we need to ask. We need in the science of iridology to be extremely critical of ourselves. Right? We always need to be asking, is this the best information we have? And is there a way to get better information? Does that make sense? Does that make sense? We should not be so highfalutin that we're not willing to consider change, which is exactly why I went from Jensenian to constitutional. So I'd like to take a moment to introduce myself now that I've maybe sent you reeling a little bit. My name is Judith Cobb. I am a master herbalist, natural nutrition clinical practitioner, and an IPA level 3 certified instructor. There are only 4 of us level 3 instructors in the world to date. This is a new level that was introduced in July. I got into holistic healing over 40 years ago. Because I had some health problems as a young adult and I was not getting the satisfaction from the doctors that I wanted. Actually, even before then, I was interested in nutrition as a teenager. I knew back then wheat wasn't bad for us, but I knew that whole wheat was better than white. I knew that vegetables were important. I knew that white sugar was bad for us, right? And I thought midwifery was wonderful, even though it was illegal where I live. So all of that got me into learning and studying and practicing and helping people about 4 decades ago. In those years, I've written and self-distributed many books. The Pregnancy Naturally book, the Herbal Birth Kit Handbook, Healthy Kids Naturally, The Essential Guide to Nature's Sunshine Products, Biokinesiology and Color Therapy Level 1 and 2, and the Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology textbook, which is the textbook we use in the Dynamic Iridology certification program. I've also created and taught many herbal courses. Herbology Level 1, this is way back before the internet, folks. This is like in the mid 1980s, all right? And so back then classes were done face-to-face, believe it or not. And so we created a 20-hour how to use herbs that you would buy in a health food store. What are these herbs good for? And in practical use for in-home use. The students loved that so much that I went on to develop a 16-hour how to use a herbal formula that is commercially prepared, how to recognize what you could use it for based on the ingredients. Also designed and taught biokinesiology and color therapy level 1 and 2. For a few years, I was a certified prenatal educator with the ICEA, and so I designed and taught those classes, and truly fertility and pregnancy are still my favorite clinical work. And of course, in the recent years, last 5 or so years, I have been teaching the IPA approved curriculum in the Dynamic Iridology assessment system. So stay with me till the end of this. And for those of you who are interested in really learning more, there will be an invitation for you to connect with me to talk about learning more iridology. I'm also a member with my nutrition credentials of the Canadian Association of Holistic Nutrition Professionals and the Canadian Association of Natural Nutritional Practitioners. And with my herbal background, I am a professional member of the Alberta Herbalist Association. All right. Just a quick little intro here that the next live course of Dynamic Iridology is starting on April 21st. If you're a health professional, a herbalist, a nutrition coach, a naturopath, chiropractor, medical doctor, RN, if you've got a solid foundation in anatomy and physiology, and if you're interested in learning how to use iridology and learn it at a professional level, then stay tuned, because I do have an invitation for you coming up at the end. Now, if you're not a health professional, and we get a lot of people who aren't health professionals, they want the information for their own use. I always suggest that what you really want first is a really good foundation in anatomy and physiology. If you understand anatomy and physiology, you will do so much better learning iridology. And so if that is you, if you don't have that foundation in anatomy and physiology, reach out to me and I will send you a link to the course that I think is the best A&P course there is. And I don't get a commission for that. I just think their course is brilliant, so I send people to them. And I'm happy to share that information with you to help you prepare to start learning iridology. So we need to ask better questions when we're doing iridology. And by that, what I mean is, the question isn't, do irides change? The question needs to be, what changes can we see in irides and what do those changes mean? Does that make sense that if you ask a better question, you get a better answer? Yeah. Okay, so what we've got going here is we do know that irides change. We know that they don't change in the way that North American iridology has claimed for the last 60 years. And we also know that there are some iridologists who've got a lot of training under their belt, but who refuse to get current. That may sound like a judgment statement, and it probably is. I was a Jensenian iridologist for the first 10 years of my career, and I just about threw iridology out the window because over those years, I did not see the changes that I was told I would see. I put clients on heavy-duty programs. I put myself on heavy-duty programs. We saw improvements in our health, but we did not see the eyes change. And that was really frustrating. And that was, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. When I finally hit my max on frustration with this thing is when I was blessed to be able to learn about constitutional iridology. So let's dive into that and learn a little bit more. So the first change that we might see is pigment may be acquired or become more dense. This is important because I've seen many instances of this, and I've documented instances of pigment acquiring, and we're going to look at some of that. I've never seen pigment disperse or disappear. And I'm in the same boat here. I'm in the same school of thought as many well-known iridologists are, like Ellen Jensen and Tony Miller. We all agree that the eyes do not give up pigment, but they can accumulate it. All right, so let's look at this. These are my husband's eyes. This was taken with, this is a scan of a print from my very first iridology camera. And as you look at this, I want you to look in his eyes between about the 6 o'clock mark and the 7:30 mark. Okay, I want you to look really closely and see what you see in here, right down here. Now, full disclosure, different cameras look at the skin tones. Look at how this light was brighter than this because we've washed out some of the white of the iris, or the white of the eye rather. So different cameras, but what we're going to see is that something's not here, and it is clearly right here. So again, these pictures were taken about 20, 25 years apart. We know that technology makes a huge difference in how images appear. The amount of light is one thing that can also impact the size of the pupil. That alone can change how dense pigment seems to be. But when we check our landmarks and we see that we have the same marks here and here and here and here and down here and down here, we know these are the same eye. It looks like the marks have shifted position slightly. They have not. Both of these cameras are handheld, which means it's possible that maybe I wasn't holding it level, right? So we've got the same landmarks. We've got our pupils are different sizes because of the source of light, possibly, and the strength of light. Could also be some things going on in his body, depending on what was going on. But I know that LED light is much brighter than this incandescent buffered flash was. And so that's going to change how things appear. This dark pigment that is on the newer image is interesting. It has built with time. This image was taken when this fellow was in his mid-60s. When we look at the color of this pigment, it suggests liver. And what we know about liver is liver can create many different symptoms. One of those symptoms can be itchy skin. This gentleman has developed very itchy skin. We have done many liver protocols with him, and he is on liver herbs constantly. He does not drink alcohol. He does not drink any coffee or black tea. He drinks occasionally a herbal tea. He does not drink soda. He does not eat white sugar, maybe once a week, a tiny bit in a dessert. So he doesn't do white flour. He's got a very clean diet. And yet over the years, this pigment has accumulated. So what does that mean? What that means is that genetically, his liver was programmed to begin running into or creating some stress for the rest of his body. So genetically programmed, what does that mean? Well, my hair hasn't always been gray. It was genetically programmed to go gray at a certain time. I have had a certain amount of influence in slowing that down through my diet and through my lifestyle, but it's ultimately probably going to go all the way gray, right? That's a genetic programming. The same is true with pigment. When pigment deposits in the iris, it is due to genetic triggers. Due to genetic triggers. Does that make sense? If that makes sense, give me an oh yeah in the comments. Okay, so these again are the same eye. Look at how different they appear, mostly because the pupil size is radically different. Let's be critical here. Look at our skin tones. Different camera, right? Different technology from one to the other. Look at the flash. This is an incandescent buffered flash. This is an LED flash. That means this image is going to be more to the yellow side. This one is going to be more to the blue side, right? And so as we look at that, then we want to look for landmarks. And the first landmark I want to look for is we have a fiber here that does a little wiggly thing. Now, when the pupil's smaller, the fibers are going to stretch out, but we've got that same fiber right here that's a little bit wiggly, right? We want to look and see that we also have, where's another good one? Right here, we've got a little bit of a rarefaction. We have that same rarefaction right here. We have another rarefaction here, and we have that same one here. So these are the same eyes. These images, again, were taken about 20 years apart. This one would have been taken when he was in his mid-30s, early to mid-30s. So this would have been as a teenager. Now, I want you to notice on the newer image, we have a lot of little pigment freckles in his eye, right? In the older image, those pigment freckles do not exist. So when we look at this, we know that the color of the pigment tells us which organ is predisposed to being out of balance. The placement of the pigment tells us which organ is going to likely suffer for that, right? And so this is not the buildup of toxins in the body. This is simply that his body was programmed to have some liver challenges, or for the liver to be stressing at a certain point in his life. He comes from a bloodline that has 3 generations, he's the 3rd, of a liver enzyme deficiency known as Gilbert's syndrome, which messes with how he conjugates bilirubin, and likely with other things, because we know that when there's a genetic anomaly like that, it's never just one thing that's impacted, correct? And so we know from here again, this color of these pigments suggests liver. Placement again suggests which organs might be suffering for that. Now, in constitutional iridology, we're not going to try to erase these because we can't. They're not going to go away. And we're not actually going to address each and every one of these pigments unless he actually has symptoms in each of those organs. What we are going to do is work with diet and with supplements to sustain and support his liver and help it function at a more optimal level. Does that work for you? If that works, give me a "that works" in the comments box. Excellent, Inga. I love, Inga, that you are playing with me and dropping comments. That just is, I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, another change that we can see in an eye. This white ring around the edge is called a Lypenic Diathesis. Can also be called a Corneal Arcus. In this case, it would be a corneal annulus because it goes all the way around. This is actually not in the iris. This is in the cornea. The cornea, as you know, when it's in front of the iris, is clear, and it is a continuation of the sclera. And so we know that the cornea doesn't have its own circulation, but we do know that it will draw nutrients from fluids around it and from circulation in the iris. And so when we see this Lypenic diathesis, it is a suggestion of a few things. We rarely see this in people under the age of 20. We see it significantly more often in people over the age of 60. If we see it between the ages of 20 and 40, we're going to have a very serious conversation with this client about their diet and their lifestyle and a few other things. If we see between 40 and 60, we're going to have a conversation, but it might not be quite as heavy-handed as it will be for the younger ones. If we see it after the age of 60, we want to make sure we try to ascertain, can the client remember when they first started seeing this develop? All right. Now, here's what we want to pay attention to is this is a suggestion. It's an indication that the person's liver enzymes may be out of balance in a way that either messes with how they process their carbohydrates or messes with how the liver makes cholesterol and triglycerides. We can put this person on all kinds of a liver program and a cleanse and balance their diet out. But the sclera, the cornea is extremely stingy. It is not going to give this fat, this opacity back. It's not going to let that dissolve. So we will often see this opacity start as just a little piece of a sliver around the edge at one place in the eye. Over time, if the body is not well cared for, it can develop and get thicker, as in deeper. It can become more opaque, and it can eventually go all the way around the iris. So that is definitely a change that we see in eyes. Have you ever seen a Lypenic diathesis in somebody of any age? If you've seen it, I'd love to see the comment "seen it" in the chat box. Alessandra says she has seen it. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, and really, if you've been around older people much, you'll often see it there. I have seen it in someone who was 22. He's also overweight. I'm absolutely positive he is insulin resistant. He also has gout. And so his diet is not great. Hi, Tina. Thank you for saying you think so. Excellent. His diet's not great and he's not willing to change. Can't do anything with that, can we? The next thing that we see change is the pupil shape. You know, when I was little, I was taught that all pupils are round. They are not. Think of what a surprise that was when I first learned about pupil shape. Pupil shape was not a part of my original iridology training. And so what we now know about pupil shape is that it has a very, very strong connection to the nervous system and to the spine. So when we see flattenings of the pupil, it tells us where the spine likely has misalignments. Now, when we see that and we see the flattening, it means that misalignment has been there for a long time. So it's not going to be a situation that this person can make their pupil go round again by having one chiropractic adjustment or one Dorn treatment or one session with their osteopath. This is going to take a while, probably a couple of years, to make the pupil go completely round again. So really important when we see this, if we understand the placement of the flattening, to inquire about spinal alignment and to make sure that this person is doing appropriate spinal care. And Maria has just joined us from the Philippines. So good to see you again, Maria. Glad you're here. Blood vessels change in the sclera. The sclera is very dynamic, where the iris is inherent, and we've seen these eyes before. You'll recognize that pigment down at the bottom here. Where the iris is genetic and the fiber structure doesn't change. We can have pigment accumulate, but fiber structure won't change. What does change very easily, well, again, it may take a year or two, is the sclera. Glenda, hello. Thank you for joining us on the Facebook feed. So what I want you to look at here is this upper corner. And I specifically want you to look at this one blood vessel right here. I want you to notice this blood vessel coming along here as well. And what we are going to see, I call this the Harry Potter blood vessel because it looks like the Harry Potter scarf. What we see as we look at the newer photo is a couple of things. The Harry Potter blood vessel is much thicker and much longer. And the blood vessel coming across is a little bit lighter. Faith Craver says she's noticed it in her mother's eyes. I'm assuming you're talking about the Corneal Arcus there, Faith. Yeah, right? So you know that the sclera is very, very dynamic. If you've ever had one of those really ugly cries, you know the ones I mean, and you go in the washroom afterwards and you look at your eyes and they're really bloodshot and you're thinking, I can't go out there looking like this. So you splash cool water on your face and you calm down, and 30 or 40 minutes later you look and your eyes have really settled down again. That's all blood vessels. That's your blood vessels in your eyes responding to that flood of saline, which is supposed to bathe them, but when there's too much, it's not great. And so we know that these blood vessels can change more easily. We often will see these and people will say, I don't have any symptoms whatsoever, but the placement of these and exactly how these are behaving, the shape of these, will give us an indication as to what is going on, what is starting to brew in the body. As these blood vessels become more prominent, more visible, it's an indication that the problem is becoming more important, more active, more serious. As we engage in really good practices that bring the body back into balance, the blood vessels eventually calm down. To do good sclerology, we need to have a good quality photos, because it's really hard for clients to sit there pulling down on their bottom lid and looking up to try to see their brain for very long. Their eyes dry out and it's not comfortable. So having a good quality camera is often a real asset here. So what are some ways that irides don't change? This is important because I was taught differently when I learned 40 years ago. I was taught that the actual fibers, the lines in the eye would change. I was taught that, for example, an area like this, as we healed it, we would have more fibers come into this area. We now know that is not true. We now know that the fibers that are in your eye, as your eye develops after conception, before birth, those are the fibers you're going to have for the rest of your life. They will be organized in the same way for your entire life. Again, we need to consider that the pupil size may make it look like the fibers are wavier, but when the pupil comes back down, they will straighten out. And so it's important for us to recognize the impact of light and pupil size on the appearance of the fibers. When we see a lacuna like this, it is in the topmost layer of fiber in the iris. And what we're seeing inside that lacuna are fibers that are down a layer in the iris. And so when we see a lacuna like this, it means the top layer of fiber is missing from right here. And it means that that area is likely predisposed to something, to a little bit of weakness. The fibers inside just mean we're looking down a layer. That's all it means. Okay. And so we're not going to see this lacuna disappear. We're not going to see more fibers come into this area. Lacunae do not get smaller. Now, if you're a Jensenian iridologist, you're calling these lesions. The constitutional word is lacunae. And so as we look at this, we've got 3 images of the same eye. Again, this last one was taken with a different camera. We know that because of the color variations. We know that because of the light, the flash artifact. So first one, pupil is quite large. We snapped the second one before the pupil had time to actually go back to that size. So the pupil's a little bit smaller. And I want you to notice how that alters the size of the lacunae. Okay, so the lacuna here is really squished. So it's squished, so it looks like it's taller and narrower. As the pupil gets a bit smaller, it pulls these fibers and stretches them a bit, which makes the lacuna look a little bit shorter. And when we have a very small pupil, these fibers are really getting more stretched out, and it makes the lacuna look shorter from top to bottom yet again. That is not a sign of healing. That is a sign of change of lighting and change of technology. Right, so if anyone says, oh, look at this lacuna, it's smaller, it's like a balloon. Think of, you know, those balloons that you make party animals out of for a kid's birthday party? You've got the balloon, it's full of air. When you start twisting it, you're changing its shape, but you're not changing the volume. You're not changing how much air is in there. That's kind of what's happening here. As the fibers get stretched, the appearance of the shape changes, but the actual volume of the lacuna has stayed the same. Does that make sense? We don't say that lacunae are getting smaller. So important. So from here, we need to ask, what does all this mean? Can we monitor health improvements through the Irides? Makes sense. Thank you, Alessandra. I appreciate that. Can we monitor health improvements through the Irides? No, not through the Irides, because the fibers don't move in response to what we are doing with supplements or diet, and the pigment does not disperse. We may see improvements in the sclera. We would hope that over time we see different blood vessels in the sclera correct if we've done the right things. But really, the proof is in the pudding here, and that pudding is monitoring symptoms and or medical tests, right? So important that we have an objective way, as much as possible, of monitoring the changes. And I think that's very important for us to recognize. Can we see potential health challenges that could arise? Yeah. When we see pigment accumulate, we can begin to understand where health challenges may be starting to come up. When we know how to combine markings we see in the eye with symptoms the client has, we understand the root of the problem and can work with it. But we don't do iridology to change the eye color, right? We do iridology to assess health. We don't do herbal things to change the eye color. We do herbal things and dietary things to improve the health, right? That's what the bottom line really is here. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to the Dynamic Iridology Assessment System for Health Professionals course, and we're just going to spend a few minutes on this. This is a course, it's the only live, online, fully mentored course for nutritionists, herbalists, and naturopaths who want to streamline their clinical work without sacrificing client care. My experience is that too many holistic practitioners see the client and get paid for that time, but then the practitioner goes off on their own time and creates the protocol. And that's time they're not getting paid for. The way I teach Iridology teaches you how to do the assessment and the program creation in your paid session. In doing that, you create programs that are simple enough that they will not overwhelm your client, but they will get results for your client. And it will encourage your client to stick to the program. It will also encourage your client to come back for future appointments, which is what we want. We want repeat business. It's, you know, in the marketing world, they say it's cheaper to keep a client than it is to find a new one, right? Costs you less. So if you want to learn more than just iris markers, if you want to learn how the markers work together, if you want support in learning how to create protocols for your clients, if you want long-term support and mentoring beyond the extent of the class, then we need to talk. This course, the Dynamic Iridology Assessment, is 40 hours of classroom time done in 22-hour-long live webinars, but it includes an unlimited amount of mentoring, and we really work hard to help you integrate what you already know about nutrition, herbology, aromatherapy, whatever your modalities are, we work to help you incorporate that into your iridology practice. Oops, blank slide. Iridology will help you to do faster assessments. It will help you to be more accurate in your assessments. It will help you to be better and faster in building rapport. Sometimes you have clients where they're a little hard to reach. Have you ever experienced that, where you feel like you're doing all the talking and they're just sitting there almost staring at you blankly? I find that when I do iridology and when I do it well, that rapport is almost instant, because the iridology helps me to ask questions that are laser focused on what my client's needs are. And when we do that, the client feels like they've been heard and they are being validated. That's important. I also find that when I do iridology, it eliminates the need for an intake form. I never give my clients a questionnaire, never. I let the iridology guide the iridology, and what my client wants help with, I let that be the guide for the questions that I'm going to ask. So again, the next live course is starting on April 21st. And if you are a holistic professional, if you're a health professional, rather, you've got that base of anatomy and physiology under your belt, and you're thinking, could this course be good for me? I encourage you to book an Insight Zoom meeting with me. Use this URL, tinyurl.com/iridology-insight, to set up a date and a time for a Zoom meeting where we can talk about your business, about where you're at in your business, and about where you want to go. So we can decide if this iridology course is a good fit for you. This is not a sales call. This is not a high pressure call. Probably at least half the people I speak with, I send off to do anatomy and physiology first, or I refer them to another type of a program because this is not the right fit for them, right? So if you want to know, if you just want to have a conversation, then book a call with me. You might think that April is a long way away. I only accept 10 students in my courses. And so when that is full, if that's filled up by the middle of March, then you're going to have to wait for the next date. So if you're thinking, I want more information, and I think I might want the April start date, then I encourage you to schedule a call with me. Sharon Bimrose is one of my graduates. She's a naturopath from Australia. She'd already taken iridology before she came to me. And she said about the course, Judith's course, Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology, surpassed my previous training in structure, content delivery, documentation, and support. Iridology has certainly reduced the time required for prioritizing a treatment plan. Iridology, without a doubt, has been a huge game changer to my practice. I love that. Tina says, I'm a massage therapist and I've always been interested in learning iridology. I think it would be a great addition to my practice. My clients always discuss health concerns and herbal remedies. Tina, yes, yes, please book a call, because yes, I agree. And you've got your anatomy and physiology from your massage training. Sounds like you've got some experience with herbs as well. Yes, we need to talk. Again, that next course is starting April 21st. And I would love to chat with you. Even if you're thinking, well, I don't know if I've got enough anatomy under my belt. I don't know if this is really the right thing that I want to do right now. I'm happy to spend 30 minutes chatting with you, coaching you, mentoring you to help you find the direction that you need to go. So schedule a call, schedule a Zoom appointment with me. There's no cost, no obligation. Think of it as a mentoring call. If the mentorship says you need more A&P, I'll send you that direction. If the mentorship says, yes, this is the right course, but it's not the right time, we'll put you on a list for future notifications. If the mentorship says, this is it, this is the time, get moving, I will push you that direction gently and with love. I hope you found this helpful. I look forward to speaking with many of you, if not all of you, in the very near future. And yeah, take care and have a good one. Bye for now.